So, good afternoon, everybody, or depending on where you are, it might be good morning as it is for Geraldine in Bradford in the UK, or for some of our American colleagues, depending on whether you're on the East Coast, the West Coast, or somewhere in the middle, down south, or up north across the border in Canada. It's somewhere between 11 o'clock in the evening of yesterday or 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning today. But breakfast time in Bradford, I understand, Geraldine.
Yes, 8 o'clock in the morning. I just
Excellent.
got my breakfast tea with a kangaroo on the cup.
You've come equipped with props. So welcome to Haven Home Safe's video stream about life in lockdown, I guess. So we're recording this for those of our staff who aren't able to log on at the moment, and anybody else who wants to look at it into the future. It's also going live, not only out on Zoom on this webinar, but also live on Facebook as well. So good afternoon and or evening and or morning and or mid-morning to everybody. So before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm standing on the land of the Jara people and the tribes of the Jarjarung. And I acknowledge their ongoing relationship and custodianship and ownership of this land that was never sold, nor traded, nor ceded. And I acknowledge their forbearance on an ongoing basis for our occupation with them of that land. And I recognise and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I also acknowledge that many people on this call will be standing on traditional, if not sacred ground from all parts of Australia. So joining me today is my very great friend and colleague, Geraldine Howley OBE, the CEO of Incommunities, based in Bradford in the north of England. Now, for some of you, you may have seen this detail on the invitation, but for those of you who have not, and for the record, Geraldine is the CEO of Incommunities, which is one of the leading housing associations in the UK. And she's a strong participant and former chair of the International Housing Partnership. And we're going to have a chat today about life in lockdown for housing associations and what we might be learning, what we might be finding out about our own resilience and others, and perhaps what we might take from this experience. But first, a little bit about Geraldine. So watch her blush as I go very quickly through what is a massively powerful bio, and I've just compressed it very, very to its kind of the really stunning stuff, basically. So Geraldine's organisation is one of the largest social housing providers in the UK. She has over 22,600 homes that they develop, manage and look after. And I'll leave it to Geraldine to talk about how many tenants that is and the diversity of that. But I know Bradford is an amazingly diverse community. Geraldine started as a temporary housing receptionist with the Bradford Council over 35 years ago. She was obviously a very small child at the time before she became the Director of Housing for that authority. And since 2003, Geraldine has led the organisation and has invested, and for the Australians, please sit down and hold your breath for this. They've invested over £400 million in modernising and building new homes and transforming neighbourhoods. The face of housing associations are very different from Australia, where we tend to be distributed in our neighbourhoods. Geraldine has served as the president of the gold standard of housing association professional development, the Chartered Institute of Housing, and had previously been elected as the body's vice president. And since then, she's been elected to the governing board of the Chartered Institute of Housing. I might also add that during Geraldine's presidency of the Chartered Institute, she raised, again, sit down for this one, Australians, £47,000 for the Prince's Trust, which does all sorts of fabulous charity work throughout the UK. That's like well over $100,000 while you're running a housing association, while you're chair of the Chartered Institute, and just on the way past, you decide to raise 100 grand for the Prince's Trust. Unsurprisingly, this is just a snapshot of some of the stuff Geraldine has done. One of the things that is a great initiative that Geraldine has done is create the GEM program, the Graduate Employee Mentoring Program, which we're very jealous of over here. But the GEM program basically nurtures very talented graduates to become the leaders of this industry and others into the future. Because someone's pointed out at some point, there seems to be a lot of people with grey hair running housing associations. Geraldine clearly is not one of them. And the GEM program has taken on graduates, not just from England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, but also from Canada as well. Geraldine's a member of the International Housing Partnership, as I mentioned, and has been made a doctor of the University of Bradford for our outstanding contribution. And I could go on, I won't, but Geraldine is an inspirational and genuine colleague and a great friend of mine, and a great friend of Haven Home Safe, having spent some time and come and had a look at what we do in previous years. So Geraldine, welcome. Thanks for coming and spending precious time.
Thank you so much. I am blushing. Thank you for that.
My work here is almost done.
It was a great visit to your organisation. I was really, really impressed with what I saw, and it was great to go out and see some of the communities as well. And I took something back from there. Yeah, learned quite a lot.
Thanks, Geraldine. So I'm wondering if you could just give us a bit of an overview about your organisation, a little bit about Bradford, some of the turnover and property, and just the size and scale of the organisation, I guess, just to position that, particularly for us in the Australian context here.
Okay, well, Incommunities is a housing association which we call a stock transfer. So originally, those 23,000 homes belonged to Bradford Council, and we transferred in 2003. And the reason for that really was investment, because the public sector borrowing just wasn't sufficient to invest in our homes. And by doing that, like you say, we could go out and we could borrow those hundreds of millions from the banks at the time, and we've moved on since then and sort of raised a bond. So that enabled us to refurbish all the homes. We started off, so we're in Bradford, we started off in Bradford. Bradford is the fourth biggest metropolitan district in the UK. It's got 500,000 population, and it's a very varied city, very varied district, because you have sort of inner city areas where in some cases there's quite a bit of poverty and deprivation, and you move out to the outer areas, there's lots of villages and there's lots of wealth, and in one particular area, Ilkley, some of you may have heard of Ilkley more by Tap, the song, but where we've got quite a few millionaires living there. So it's a very mixed city, mixed incomes, and sort of lots of, and also very multicultural, very diverse. And I would say, some great communities, and there's, I would say, there's quite a lot of harmony within those communities as well, and quite, it's good to see that, that integration is starting to happen as well, and that sort of really does make a difference in the city, embracing sort of all communities and all cultures. So what we moved on from just being in Bradford into other parts of Yorkshire, we started building homes. Once we'd refurbished the homes, we started building homes within Bradford. And then our board said, well, why don't you just go over the borders a bit into other parts of Yorkshire? So we're now in lots of other areas. I don't know if some of you recognise them, places called Huddersfield, Wakefield, Sheffield, those sort of areas. And we're moving into Harrogate. And so there's lots of, and Skipton. And so we're now sort of spreading out, and we took in a small association, which was people mainly with what we call Black and Minority Ethnic Housing Association. It was specialist accommodation, and we took that in about 4 years ago. So that got us into sort of other areas of Yorkshire as well. So we've still got similar amount. We've got about 23,000 homes, because over in England we do have the right to buy, and a lot of people exercise that choice, so we have lost a few properties through that. But also when we transferred, we had a lot of obsolete properties, and properties we wouldn't be proud to live in, so why would we want our tenants to live in there? So we've been doing a demolition program, and particularly sort of some of our tower blocks, which that whilst they didn't have cladding problems, they were not popular, and they were getting a bit old, design issues, sound insulation. So we're taking down 11 tower blocks, and we've already done 3 of those, and we've sold 2 to a private developer, and then we're moving the other ones out after lockdown, I think. So they're just stood waiting at the moment to go. And we've removed some of our other less attractive accommodation. It's mainly in Bradford. Houses are what people want to live in, and there's not much demand like there is in London and Manchester for apartments. It's just not, it's not the communities, it's not the market. And so we had the wrong balance of stock, and that's what we've been doing. We're trying to move to the right balance, getting the right homes in the right location, for the right communities, and that's our sort of mission at the moment. And building good quality homes in those locations where they're needed. So we have a big turnover. We have a 90 million annual turnover, and we do a lot getting people into work. So as well as building houses and increasing the supply of homes, we have a lot of people out of work. So we have about 70% of our tenants that are on benefits. So that includes the elderly who are not, sort of going to go out and look for work. But what we're trying to do is just get people into work programs, and we've been really, really successful with, ironically, European funding, and we've still got some European funding, thank you. And we've got 400 people into work, 400 of our sort of customers into work through these work programs. And we're now running a program where we just help people with interviews and CVs and things like that. So really proud of sort of the work that we do there, because our mission is about improving lives in communities. So it's not just about the bricks and mortar and building homes, which is important. It's about what do we do in those communities, and that's at the heart of Incommunities, I'd say.
Thanks, Geraldine. There's so much stuff there. I love the way that when you're talking about raising debt on the way past, just in the sentence you drop the fact, we raised a bond. Like in 15 years and enormous efforts here to raise one bond, yet your organisation just raises one on the way past. I also just wanted to mention that, in Bradford, you really come from an amazing, strong history of social justice, because you're just down the road from Saltstone,
yes.
I think, where back was it the 1700s? That guy built not only he built his factory, but he built factory housing and factory community and factory schools. So, our mutual friend Scott Langford says we all stand on the shoulders of giants, but your history goes back a bit further there than ours. Geraldine, the COVID-19, the novel coronavirus, which is devastating much of the world at the moment, and certainly sitting here in Australia and with our colleagues in New Zealand, there are some benefits to being an island nation who saw this coming quickly and acted quickly. Some countries didn't, and the UK seems to be getting hit pretty hard. What's the impact of COVID-19 in Bradford and on your operations, your staff, your tenants, yourself? What's some of the things that you're doing at the moment and some of the things you think you need to do?
Okay, well, we did come to this a bit late, not in communities, but as a country. And I think what the initial advice was just sort of try some social isolation, and holidays abroad got cancelled. But then we had, unusually for this country, fantastic weather, and people were on the beaches because it was, we're getting sunshine and good weather. And there was a weekend where I think everybody was in shock when they saw everybody running out to, just sort of out to the country and the beaches and not socially isolating at all. And then it was after that sort of the lockdown, the full lockdown came. But I think during that time, it did mean that there were people, they had the Cheltenham races, and there were quite a lot of people that did sort of get the virus. So I think in one way we came to it too slow. And as a result of that, we're now just at the peak, but we're not coming down from it. And I think the shocking thing is we've been concentrating on hospitals and what's happening in the hospitals, and that seems to have being managed, and as I say, getting to that peak and hopefully going in the other direction. But what's been happening behind the scenes is care homes. And so I think the numbers could possibly go up, because we're finding that a lot of care homes have now got the virus, and it wasn't really counted in the numbers so much. And so now that's coming through. So I think we're way behind you in terms of being able to sort of say we're on top of this. So what did it mean for Incommunities? Well, we got, because the announcement came and it was like straight away. I remember when sort of Boris Johnson came on and just said, right, well, that's it now. And you know, everybody, just key workers, etc. So there was no time. There wasn't a day, and it was a weekend when it happened. There wasn't a day to say, all right, everybody's in the office, let's manage this. So we literally had to manage it over a weekend and say to people, don't come in on Monday. But we were fortunate, and thank goodness, that we had just got a brand new customer services centre. And I'd said to the IT guy not so long back, if people wanted to work from home using this, you know, this technology, will it work? And he said, yeah, actually it can cope with it, it will work. And thank goodness, because within 4 days we had everybody equipped, and we've got 1,000 staff, not everybody office based, I have to say, but we had everybody equipped with the technology in their own homes to be able to work from home. And it was just great that that technology was there. However, we do run a lot of services, essential services. So and obviously, like yourselves, we do gas servicing, so those people still have to go out and do that. We have our own repairs service, our own building services, so we have our own plumbers and joiners and plasterers, etc. So those people need to go out and do emergency repairs. And we also have what we call a fall service. It's called Trust Care. So we operate this on behalf of Bradford across the whole of the district. So it's people, vulnerable people, elderly people, people that might be ill, or people that may fall essentially or need help. And I've got a team of people that go out and lift those people or see if they need an ambulance. So that's the one which is sort of was of concern, as well as our sheltered housing. Mm-hmm. So we had to close all the communal areas very quickly. Big issue there, because the Royal Mail won't deliver to those homes, and they just throw the correspondence into the communal area, and we've got staff having to act as sort of posties and going round. So we've got a balance of people working from home, and that seems to be going really well. But then we've got these people that are out in the areas. And the one thing that did happen really quickly is that we realised people couldn't go out and get food, and there was either people couldn't afford to get the food because there were particular people that were waiting for universal, our benefits. People got made redundant. People were self-isolating, shielding. And so we set up with the council a big food distribution centre in you have Westfields, don't you? It's like a Westfield. Yep. It was originally Westfield, we call it the Broadway now. And we've taken the whole warehouse, because it's not being used, and that's a food distribution centre. And our staff, some of our staff are working there, and we've done 4,000, I think, parcels there, sending that out to people. And you mentioned Salts Mill, they have been brilliant. They emptied all their freezers and gave us the food to give to a charity, and just thousands of pounds worth of really top quality food went out to our communities. So just fantastic that they did that. So we've got people working in food, people going out doing repairs, essential, people getting homes ready, because we've got a rise in domestic abuse, which is very, very sad. And we're still doing things like taking refugees, asylum seekers, homeless people. We're moving homeless people out of the bed and breakfast now into our homes. So there's a lot of activity going on, and we've got to make sure our staff are safe. So we have got the PPE, and there's a guy in our organisation that's been fantastic in sourcing it, and I'm like, well done. We've not run out of that. And so that's all going along, as well as the people that are working from home. So I have been out to the food warehouse, took some chocolates out to them, and I intend to go out and see the other people tomorrow with my mask on, and making sure that I'm protected as well. The other thing we're doing is assurance calls to our tenants. So anybody over 70 gets a regular call, and anybody that we class as vulnerable gets a regular call. And we ask them if they want any shopping, and we do the shopping for them as well. So that's going a lot on in the sort of background as well. I'm so proud of the staff, because it's really interesting that everybody's wanted to just go that extra mile and do things for people. And you know, that's really, really, you know, really sort of positive that we haven't had to ask. You know, people have said, you know, can I go work in the food warehouse? Can I do something to help?
That is fantastic, isn't it? I mean, as you describe all this for Australian housing associations, where we rarely have anything remotely resembling a tower block, for example. I mean, I think we have one multi-storey building that's over 3 stories. That's about 10 stories down in Doncaster. Most of the rest of our stuff is what you would refer to as low-rise, small apartment blocks, and they're a bit rare. And the rest are, I think, what you would refer to as villas, freestanding homes on individual blocks, or sort of what we call a townhouse development. So, you know, small row of houses on a self-contained block. And so as those units are distributed around neighbourhoods and towns, you know, salt and peppered, I think is the term that is often used. Our impact and our footprint in neighbourhoods is actually almost invisible, whereas your impact and footprint in neighbourhoods is amazingly powerful. And so people very much look to the housing association for all sorts of things, like, for example, running a food bank for your clients. I mean, there are a lot of similarities. We both have vulnerable tenants. You know, our modest property portfolio of about not quite 2,500 homes. I think we had about 556 tenants who we would classify as vulnerable, either by virtue of age or disability or some other reason. And like you, we've been touching base with those people and asking them how they would like us to continue to touch base with them, whether it's electronic, whether it's a phone call, whether it's email, all of these sorts of things. And like you, fortunately, we've had the technology in place to be able to get our people out of the office, but we still have our office open, but on a skeleton staff. But when people come into the office, they're dealing with a virtual concierge. So, you know, there's a big screen with where they see themselves and one of our staff members, and we work it from there. So a lot of similarities in terms of the staff that you've got, who they still go out. You've still got your trades out there. You're still dealing with essential services, and the PPE that they can get. I'm amazed to hear that you've got someone who could source that. It must be a Bradford version of Fagan, I imagine, to be able to source that in the UK at the moment. So in terms of some of the changes in terms of your technology that you're starting to pick up, and please, I think your staff, like ours, they just lift in times like this, which is fabulous to see, and it says so much about human nature and the sort of people that we employ. But do you think that the change in how people are operating will have impacts as we go forward, as we come out the other side of whatever that looks like with this COVID-19?
Yes, we're never going to go back to how it was, and I think there's some changes in terms of how we will work going forward, but also I think there's that changes in sort of how people work together and that culture, and I think it has driven a different sort of culture. One of the things that we were working to is to get more and more people working from home and agile working, and some of, you know, as managers, people saying, yeah, how do we know that they are doing a full day's work, and how do we know this and actually the technology does show when people are working, but there was that element of how do you let go, I think, more than anything, or how can we as managers let go and let our staff just get on with it and work at home and do things. And I think what this has demonstrated, you just have to look at the outcomes, and it's just been so effective. So I just think we talk about sort of empowering staff, and I think I know it's a bit of a cheesy word, but I think that's what this has enabled us to do, because we have had to work so remotely. We have had to rely on sort of I've got Zoomitis, by the way, but we have had to rely on Zoom calls and different ways of communicating. Yeah. Now we've got an app called Workplace, which we set up last year, and it's been really, really good, and it's coming into it. So it's like a Facebook for just the organisation. And I've noticed more and more, once upon a time, it's just the managers posting on it and senior management. And now everybody's posting on it, and people are putting funny things on, like wearing different socks with a theme on and a photograph of the socks coming up, and just wacky things. Somebody's dressed up a giraffe in the, not a real giraffe, paper mache sort of giraffe in the garden, and has in nurses in sort of NHS PPE, and they do a theme on that every day. And it's brought some fun. Funnily enough, even though this crisis is just shocking, it's made people it's brought a little bit of fun into us working together, because we're not interacting in the workplace. So people are trying to find that interactions in different ways, and that communication in different ways. And going forward, I mean, we've got a big office. We've got 5 floors, 2 wings in Saltaire, and we're saying, do we really need that big office going forward? But what I am absolutely sure about is, and I'm, as an extrovert, it's killing me being at home all the time, but I'm not having that interaction. And the introverts are all going, we're loving this, you know, like, get me out. But I think we can get that balance right, because I do believe that you can't exist on Zoom. It's got its uses. I think we'll use it going forward. But I think there's nothing better than that social interaction, that face-to-face interaction. So I think I want to get a blend of that going forward, so that some people, you can work from home when you need to, but also, you know, coming together at meetings, coming together. I don't want to create silos, and I think, you know, we've got out of that silo. And my biggest worry is working from home and doing your work for your own different areas. You know, you're just not interrupting across the other sort of departments as much. So I think it's about how we make sure that we do come together to meet, to talk, and work in different ways. But certainly you can work much smarter. We can use that technology, and there will be a new normal, as I'm sure for everybody going forward.
Yeah, it's really interesting that I mean, I've started to determine that I'm going to have ZFDs, you know, so a number of the people in IHP, we have talked about the mythical AFD, the alcohol-free day, but I'm going to have some ZFDs, Zoom-free days, because I'm with you, the Zoomitis, and it's intense, and in fact, we're going to share out on SharePoint, which is the tool we use for our kind of internal communication, an article in the next couple of days that I think actually came from the BBC about why is it that I'm so tired from doing Zoom, and it's picking up all this cognitive dissonance and the wearing that has. But one of the things that I think you've absolutely put your finger on, Geraldine, which I share with you, is that as we have people working remotely, they tend to be connected with their particular team, and so. And they are missing all that sort of incidental water cooler talking across corrals and down corridor stuff. And yeah, I think we run the risk that people will start to see, you know, in very linear lines, the work that they're doing is the most important thing, and we, you know, dare not anybody from any other area interrupt. And so, you know, there are risks in this, and I think you're right. We've got to manage that. We've got to be across that. I don't know about dressing giraffes or even ones, but we did have a suggestion from one of our staff that we should have a dance party every day at 3 o'clock. Now, I'm not going to lead that one off, can I say? That would be just way too awkward. But I think there's a lot of these sorts of things going on. Certainly, we've got parents who are working from home and also schooling from home. We've got a little subset.
Yeah.
Moment, you know, that has a catch up on that. So I think a lot of those things are going to be particularly useful going forward. And I agree entirely. We're not going back. You know, elements of what we've got we'll keep, and hopefully we'll keep the best. But certainly the productivity, opportunity that I think presents with technology is going to be really something very useful for us to continue to work on and see how we can make the best of both elements of what we had and where we're going. One of the things that struck me is the sudden resilience that we discover about our staff. I mean, in the UK, your occupation and your work health safety laws are you know, they're pretty full on, as indeed they are here, perhaps not quite to the same extent. And so we have this habit of not only protecting people's safety in all elements, but often moving to almost kid glove treatment for adults, which I've always found just a little bit amusing. But the sudden resilience of our people, I find, is fascinating. Have you noticed anything in that regard?
Absolutely, yeah, it has brought that to the fore actually, and I think that is people are just have adapted so well, but there are all sorts of issues that have come our way. I mean, there will be, as well as talking about new normal, there's going to be a big sort of recovery sort of period as well. But the fact that I'm so proud of those key frontline people, the key workers that are going out when it's a very risky time, and people don't want to let them in the homes either. So they're having to sort of have this rejection. They get to the front door and people getting quite, we've had some people that have been a bit angry about why even coming, but we have to go out and do the gas checks. We've got to demonstrate we've tried to get in, and so that's been hard for them because people haven't wanted them to go near, and you know, they've had to work. They're working in that environment, and the same as our trust care people that are going into people's homes and having to help people and putting themselves at risk as well. So there is, but I think that resilience as well about people working on their own at home, and people, like you say, people that are single parents and they've got the children and the balance in the work with everything. And it's just, yeah, and I think hopefully we won't lose that because people have learned how to sort of work independently, not rely so much on other people, and be strong through all of this and get through this. And I think we've learned some lessons as well, because one of the things, people have got into debt, and we've approached it slightly differently. So rather than where we'd normally go, we do have a financial inclusion sort of team and we help with budgeting, but normally the end result is if people are not paying, you're going up to sort of like, well, we might have to look at somebody, maybe the worst case scenario, losing the home. But that's not, in these times, that's not becoming the conversation. The conversation is about how can we be more flexible with you. And actually we've learned from that by approaching the discussion that way and be more flexible with people and just saying, well, yeah, okay, well, you know, pay it differently, or we'll understand if you don't pay for a few weeks, rather than we've learned that people are much more engaging with us about their debt, and I just think going forward that flexible approach will sort of bring dividends really, rather than sort of a bit hard hitting, we've got to get the money in. And we have got I mean, our people that are working in income have been really worried, you know, about how we can get the income in, but it's actually not anywhere near as bad as what we thought, because we're having those conversations and helping people more. So yeah, so I just think it's, people have had to work and adapt to the situation in how they work with people as well, and they have shown that, you know, across the board. I do think there is that resilience, and particularly with the leadership. I'm very proud of my management team, because they've had to really sort of get on with the operations and show that resilience. And working remotely, it's quite hard, isn't it? You know, sort of just getting everybody marshaled into doing things, but you're sort of somewhere else over a screen. So yeah, and hopefully we won't lose that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about the watching people step up, and also there are difficulties, and we can't, you know, and we shouldn't pretend that they're not. And I think one of the great fears for some of the housing associations here was that we would see a massive decrease in rent being paid, and certainly for those organisations that are entirely reliant on a rent roll to survive, that's life and death stuff for the organisation, everyone who works for it. Our particular situation as a homelessness services provider puts us in a slightly different and less precarious position. But the interesting thing is people continue to pay. I mean, it's early days, we're only 8 weeks in. And I guess in a sense, when the majority of your clients are dependent on statutory incomes or benefits, actually we're almost in a counter-cyclical business. You know, we're not going to see that, we're not going to see perhaps the devastation that many private landlords would do in particular. So I guess we're at about 35 minutes or so now, Geraldine, and we didn't want to keep people much longer than 40 minutes because they can listen to you all day, but seriously, if they had to put up with me, they'll fade out and go to sleep. So in terms of learnings that we're picking up, do you think, what are the things that are jumping out at you that you think you'll take forward? What are the things that this experience we're going through now might lead you to, particularly as we head hopefully into a post-COVID world?
Yeah, well, one thing I wish we'd had when this happened was a plan for a pandemic. We have plans. We have plans for everything. Plans for the IT systems going down. Plans for a fire in the building. Plans for if we, the markets crash. Plans for we had a plan for when we had to take the rent cut and we lost sort of millions of pounds. So we have plans for everything, but we didn't have a plan for a pandemic. And I remember years ago, we had a guy that chaired an NHS board and there was bird flu around. And he said, you should have a plan for this bird flu. And we're all going, really? And we just didn't, because we just thought that's never going to happen, And I look now and I think, well, the one thing that we did work really quickly. That first week was, I have to say, was firefighting. It was like round the clock working and crisis management. And if we'd had that plan, it might just been a bit easier. So that's the one thing I learned. But I think going forward, there will be, as we all talk about, there will be that new normal. There is a recovery period. People are not ringing up and ordering repairs. We've got, we're probably getting a third of what we normally get. There's going to be catch up probably on the maintenance of our homes because people, and I think until we've got a vaccine, when we get back, there'll be still people saying, actually, I'm shielding, I don't want you in my home. So I think we're going to have some challenges out there with people having the confidence to let us go in and do essential repairs and things like that. But yeah, going forward, I think it is about grasping the, I sort of hesitate when I use this word, but grasping some of the opportunities that working in this way has brought, because it has, and learning from that, whilst making sure that we keep to the values of the organisation so we don't become faceless and we don't be remote. So I think there's going to be a big push about more across teams working when we do get back and how we work differently that way, but remembering what our values are, which is improving lives, and learning from some of the ways we have engaged with our customers in different ways through assurance calls, more flexible rent deals, but making sure at the same time we get the income in. So we're going to have a session with the team, two, one on the recovery, but then one on an inclusive session really about, let's just have some thoughts on what you all see the new normal looking like, and let's have some input from everybody. And I'd like to sort of feed that across the organisation and get everybody else's thoughts as well, but certainly working in different ways and working smarter, I'd say.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of similarities there. I mean, we didn't have a specific pandemic plan, but we, like you, had a business continuity crisis plan. Of course, these things in the Australian context are more about floods and bushfires, not necessarily short-term big hits, and usually localised. Okay, maybe the whole state of Victoria goes underwater in 2011 and half of it burns in 2009, but essentially they're localised and generally they're short-term. This is not localised. It is not short-term. It is fundamentally changing our work practice. It will fundamentally change how we relate to each other, both as tenants and as workers and as staff and as managers and in the community. So we've got a long way to go. I was just going to we had a Q&A running, and I don't want to run for too long, Geraldine, because I know you've actually got to get to work. But Nick Proud, the CEO of Power Housing Australia, is very interested to know if this was to happen again, what might you do differently?
What might we do? Well, we'd have that plan. Most definitely have the plan. We'd make sure, I suppose, going forward, but I'll be like, have we got stocks of PPE and have we got the plan? Does everybody know what So it is about, well, everybody know if this happens, there could be another lockdown, because we could all come out and it could go back up, and you know, so it's just, are we ready for this? And so I think it's all about that, you know, preparing and planning. But we've got what we do have demonstrated is that our systems have worked. So in terms of IT and things, it's all worked, and we're just fortunate we've invested a lot in this. We have been able, we don't rely on contractors too much, so that's been in-house, so we've been fortunate there. I suppose the thing where, and I don't know how you do that differently, we have managed to still continue to build some homes because we do our own development, and maybe where you've had to rely on other people developing, they've fallen through. So maybe a little bit about, you know, can we up the capacity for our own to do more, you know, development ourselves? But I think it just starts with the very beginning, really, what would we do differently? We'd make sure we knew what we were doing, and then not have that week of, oh my goodness, what does this mean for everybody?
Yeah.
And so yeah, just been having it ready.
There is always nothing to be said about the value of being able to make stuff up as you go. And I think the other thing is that the more that you do have plans for, as you say, you know, for IT meltdowns, for, you know, transport lockdowns, all these other things that have all been part of the established planning for UK housing associations for so long. The great thing is you actually know how to plan, and you know how to manage these plans. So the ability to, as you say, firefight, it comes from a basis of being across these sorts of things in the past in any event.
Yeah.
Geraldine, I'm going to wind it up, as much as I'd love to continue talking, because for those who have not been part of the IHP, the joy of getting together with people from your tribe and talking housing stuff in detail for a week every year is just an absolute joy. So we could talk all day about this stuff and then some, but we do need to wind this up. Kudos, Geraldine. Thank you for spending some time with us.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and it's been great to have the conversations like you say. So thank you. Yeah.
We'll do it again soon.
I'm going to say have a good day, but your day is nearly over, isn't it?
Well, there's a separate part of the day that starts now, and I think we call that wine o'clock.
I'll look forward to that later.
See you, Geraldine.
Okay,
thanks everybody for joining us. Bye now.
Bye. Thank you.